Civic freedom can be defined by Marcus Cicero. Cicero, over 2,000 years ago, defined freedom as participation in power. That's the definition of freedom. It's not freedom to choose an app. It's not freedom to send a text message. They send plenty of text messages in China. They send plenty of text messages in dictatorships around the world. Civic freedom means that in a variety of ways, between and at elections, you participate in decisions that affect you. Whatever touches all should be decided by all is an old Roman adage. Now, obviously you can't decide everything like direct democracy, a parliament of 25 million Canadian adults on every issue. There's a delegation there. But in our countries, there's been delegation run riot, total riot. First of all, it's a delegation to larger and larger populated districts. So you have 535 members of Congress. You had it when there is 80 million people, well, a little less because Alaska and Hawaii were not states, but roughly now you have 330 million people, 535 members of Congress. The delegation comes also by the interference of money in politics. And that blurs the significance of even a good vote by your standards. And there's a delegation by way of mystery. The mystery of the legislative process, of the regulatory process, the legal jargon that provides lawyers with their monopolistic inventory. There are all kinds of ways. And then once you get past the parliament and the legislature, then the delegation is stretched out like a rubber band beyond belief. It goes to the executive branches, the departments of defense, which is a huge world by itself. It goes to agencies, innumerable agencies. They then delegate it further by private contracting. You call it privatization. By outsourcing half of the Pentagon's war-making costs. And then it goes even worse than that. At the state level, it goes to wholly unaccountable public authorities and public districts. And people don't even know their names and what neighborhoods are in what public districts. So you see, by the time the rubber band stretches, where is the average citizen? The average citizen is basically out of it. The average citizen plunges into their personal lives to try to make the best of it. And you can see it. Making the best of it is trying to get a good job, trying to maneuver your convenience and getting back and forth and daycare, trying to get a decent pension, trying to have an interesting workplace, and the rest of the time is dealing with family life and entertainment. And entertainment now is taking up more and more time because that, again, is almost a relief factor, a frustration at the end of the day. Just plop down and look at a TV movie or sports or whatever. And those are the areas where parents don't have enough time for their children. Children are now spending less time with adults than any children in human history. Now, some people may say that's a blessing. And certainly McDonald's believes that with its proverbial adage, it's a child's world. They tell children in direct marketing to children, bypassing and undermining the authority of parents. You want to talk about radical extremism? Try that one. That one comes in, the condemnation of direct marketing to children comes in over 90%. Left, right, doesn't matter. There's a left-right convergence in the United States on most of the important issues of confronting the country. Part of it on the military side is fudge because the information flow is not good. When it is good, when some of these soldiers come back and tell what really happened in Iraq, the right wing listens to that. Has to be the messenger, the right messenger. But on areas like corporate welfare or crony capitalism, 80, 90%, breaking up the big New York banks that are too big to fail, 90%, cracking down on corporate crime, fraud, and abuse, that's in the 90%, even in raising the minimum wage, which has turned into an ideological battle for years, it comes in 70 to 80% right now in the United States. That means a lot of conservative Walmart workers. You can't have 70, 80% without having a lot of people who call themselves conservatives. Civil liberty violations in the so-called Patriot Act, that comes in over 80%. People do not like police to search their homes and not have to tell them for 72 hours that they searched their homes. They don't like the idea of the police without probable cause getting into your medical and financial records. And so if you get rid of this divide and rule for the moment, you will see that there's an incredible convergence, and I suggest probably a lot of it is the same in Canada. And when that convergence occurs, and it starts out with public opinion, and then it moves into visibility, marches, demonstrations, polling that is very specific, gets to the members of parliament, and then when it moves into the civic organizational area, and then when some candidates pick it up, it's unstoppable. It doesn't matter how powerful the corporations are. It's unstoppable. I've seen it happen with a number of pieces of legislation, the auto safety legislation, unanimous through Congress. A year before that, 1964, 65, if you said to members of Congress that there's going to be a unanimous vote to regulate the most powerful industry in the United States, they would have sent you to psychiatry. That's what happens when you have a left-right alliance. The problem with progressives is they can't stand to talk this way because they can't stand to work with right-wingers because they hate them on things like reproductive rights. It's the yuck factor. Never mind all the other things. Even on the military-industrial complex. Where did that phrase come from? Came from a conservative called General Dwight Eisenhower, who became president in his farewell address. The military-industrial complex, once you break it down and you say to right-wingers all over the country, hey, you want that bridge repaired that you've been bitching about? Do you want that school upgraded for your kids? Are you upset about drinking water that comes in less than what H2O should look like in your faucet? Wouldn't you like some decent daycare that you don't have to pay, catch this, $400 a week in many cities? How can a family afford that? Just for daycare. That's what the U.S. government allows a company to come on the premises of the U.S. Department of Environment, and government employees park their children there, $19,000 a year. They take it. They take it. The rubber band doesn't snap. The job of people who advocate for a democratic society that delivers is to make sure that rubber band snaps quicker before it becomes an irreversible subordination in the minds of millions of people who give up. You know, people who, when they're asked in a mass gathering, what's the difference between, think of a stadium full. What's the difference between apathy and ignorance? They answer, I don't care and I don't know. That means they've given up on themselves. You see it in West Virginia and the hollows of Kentucky. They're completely exploited beyond belief. Toxic water, toxic air, incredible poverty, addictive products pushed on them. On and on and on. It's a rich land with poor people, coal and all the rest. And they vote right wing. They vote for Republicans. There's a great book called Deer Hunting with Jesus that you should read to understand why they do that. And part of the understanding was when Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma, who thinks that global climate change is a hoax and has challenged the Democrats to a debate, and he can't find anyone. How about that? For the yuck factor. He's in charge of the relevant committee now in the Senate. Once, years ago, he was asked, I guess he didn't know someone was listening, but some people said, Jim, how do you win these elections? Constantly. It's that simple. It's all about God, gays, and guns. That's how he wins them. Read Deer Hunting with Jesus, written by someone who grew up there. He's a better read than Hunter Thompson. Brilliant writer. So we go back to the schools and the parents and the commercialization of everything. The struggle in a democracy is who is going to gain the mantle of supremacy? Commercial values or civic values? That's the tension. And whenever civic values are subordinated to commercial values, you get NAFTA, you get WTO, you get Stephen Harper, you get the deterioration of the Canadian consensus. You get the deterioration, two-tier health care, you get deterioration environment, you get rid of environmental assessments for the mining industry, you cut the CBC budget, on and on. When commercial values are subordinated to civic values, look what you get. You get environmental laws, you get consumer protection laws, you get prosecution of corporate criminals, you get beefed up budgets and enforcement, which is one way corporate lobbyists turn good laws into no-law laws because they strangle the enforcement budgets. No investigators, very few prosecutors, other than, the war on drugs and the war on terror and so on. When civic values are subordinated to commercial values or corporate commercial values, you get an abolition of child labor in the United States over 100 years ago. You get the Fair Labor Standards Laws. You get the Kellogg-Briand Peace Treaty that outlawed war that we belong to, and it's still on the books. What a dead letter in the 1920s. And what do the commercial values do when they lose? And when they know that they're going to confront a defiant public consensus and a sufficient level of enforcement if they try to wiggle out in succeeding years. What they do is they adjust. Corporations have very few convictions. They're expedient. They're opportunistic. We should give them repeated opportunities to be expedient and opportunistic. Once we lay down the law, it's represented by public sentiment, they adjust. If they don't adjust, alternative models displace them. Legitimate cooperatives displace them. Other institutions that deliver economic services displace them, like local economies that are becoming more and more robust over the U.S. Community health clinics and local renewable energy and farmer-to-consumer marketplaces and community banks and local transportation entities. And each dollar that is spent with these local businesses, who are never going to threaten to leave, close down unemployed people and go to China or Indonesia or whatever, every dollar spent takes it away from the Bank of America, from Exxon Mobil, et cetera. Every solar panel that's put up does the same thing. So you get displacement. Traditionally, our countries have tried to make corporations behave by regulation, by litigation, or by prosecution, or by elections. The most powerful way is displacement. You develop a displacement economy that becomes an erosion of the basic nutrients for a multinational corporate economy, which are consumer dollars and taxpayer dollars. They use the taxpayer dollars, obviously, for diminishing their risk-taking because they put it on the back of taxpayers, and you have bailouts, handouts, bailouts, all kinds of corporate welfare, which is about half of what Washington does these days. There's so many programs, they don't even catalog them. Market quotas and so forth. And if you have civic values triumphing, you don't have a federal U.S. budget that is 50% devoted to military. Can you imagine? There's no more Soviet Union. China's not interested in sending missiles here, not as long as we send our jobs and industries there. And yet, 50% of the gargantuan federal budget, aside from Medicare, Medicaid, the health insurance part, goes to military. It's actually more than that if you take in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission part, the Veterans Administration of past wars, the costs of past wars, and the like. So what do we do at the roots? Here's what we do. Who can stop us? Stop making excuses for ourselves. One is we can go to our schools and say, we want civic training courses. There are all kinds of civic groups can teach it. You don't have to add new teachers if the teachers are not equipped or the bureaucracy is not willing. You have it done that way, or you do it after school. Doesn't take long with very idealistic and inquisitive 10th graders. You want to really discomfort a politician in North America, confront them with 10 10th graders to ask questions. One time, Reagan was completely bamboozled when a 10-year-old went up to him and asked him, Mr. Reagan, what are the sources of pollution? And he says, well, they're mostly trees. So 80% of pollution comes from trees. There were other questions, too. There's a whole book called Reagan's Reign of Error by Mark Green, R-E-I-G-N. You could do one now for your, So, now, you want to do fundamental things that are easy to do, that no one can really stop you. And most of the things in building a strong democracy get you halfway there. Half of democracy is showing up, let's face it. How many of you have tried, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't reasonably active, have tried to get people out to a march, a demonstration, a lecture, a town meeting, whatever you call it here in Canada, and you're not trying to persuade them about something they don't believe in. You have a call list where there are people who agree with you. And they have 100 excuses. I got to do this, and I got to take that. And you don't have time for democracy. You're going to be busier than ever on other things that you don't like to do. Misery, anxiety, poverty, deprivation, make work are the consequences of injustice, and worse. And if you don't develop a sense of injustice at a young age, you will not have a cultivated sense of justice. And if you don't have a cultivated sense of justice, you cannot build a democratic society. And so all these children are being robotized into amorality at best, and indifference in the face of raw brutality and coarseness at worst.